Cool. Hi everyone. Welcome to the AGU Seismology section student prep workshop that we've organized for this year. We have invited speakers Will Eaton and Jensen DeGrande to give us advice on how to give coherent and concise and very clear presentations at the AGU 2025 fall meeting this year. But before that, Albert, could you next slide? We wanted to announce an upcoming event. It's the Faultless Friendships Network. It's basically like a buddy system, but for AGU, and we ran it last year. And we found that for solo travelers or people who haven't had established networks in the US, they found it really helpful and to have people like to have established networks before you come to the fall meeting and then have like lunch and look at talks together. And so if you want to sign up, that's the link. I'll just send it in the chat as well. Um, Office Friends Network. Here it
Cindy,
is. Yeah.
as well, can share this presentation later because there are so many links so that you
Yeah.
can just access them later.
Yes, exactly. We'll share this is going to be recorded and we'll share the recording on YouTube, um, and we'll post it on our social media sites. So
Mhm.
cool. We can start now, I guess. I'll take it away, Albert.
Yeah,
Uh,
so welcome everyone. My name is Albert. I'm a PhD candidate working on subsurface imaging of the crust and the mantle. And I'm using ambient noise tomography and receiver functions to image. And I'm looking at the East African Rift system. So we decided to set this up to make sure that at least we can get in touch with everyone and also to provide a few tips like we did last year to help maybe people who are still new to this and to share our own experiences. So, like Cindy said, we invited two speakers who can at least give us some of their tactics they have used before and share some of even their presentations or posters. And you can even ask them directly the questions of your interests. And so, Cindy, are we going to go through some of these brief questions that were submitted before we get in?
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So these are questions that we asked in the survey, and some people have filled those questions in, and we just probably want to answer them first, and then we'll go with the speakers.
Yeah. So, again, this material will be shared with you. So we are going to briefly go through this quickly. And then later, if you want to revisit some of those websites, you can do so because some of the materials is too much and detailed. So you can try to revisit that. So some people are saying how we prepare the poster and what are the main things to include in the poster. So again, this is the reason why we invited two people to talk about that. Uh, Will and Jensen are going to go through over that. And we included some of the links, like this one, how to craft of scientific posters. It has some of the templates that you can even look at. Are there specific formatting requirements of the poster? Yes, we'll go through over that. What is an eye-catching poster format? What should be the picture to word ratio? Uh, I think we can talk more briefly about that, but for now, at least have a feel of what questions are asked. Um, Someone says, I have not submitted an AGU abstract. So but is looking to elevate the speech skills. So again, this link provided here will give you confidence and let you know how you can elevate your skills. So is there networking event? Yes. Uh, Cindy already talked about it, and again, we'll link up uh, the link or the form here again. So you can be able to sign up. What's the general audience who attends specific sessions? How do you be assertive as a graduate student? So again, there is some material provided here. Everyone can go and read about that. It is well detailed with a lot of videos done by professors and experienced students. So anyone can, but in short, according to my experience from AGU, your expectation should be like a mixture of like people in high career and a mix of graduate students. So when you're maybe presenting, expect questions from different mixed backgrounds. Again, my colleagues will talk more about that and they'll also share their experiences. So some of the general questions again, you can, for example, like, I would like to give my presentation or can I present online? A short answer to that is yes. And again, we link down here some of the websites where you can find much of that information from AGU. Um, the presenter resources again are found on the AGU main website. Um, And then we also include some of the main materials that can help you to read. They're well detailed. Some of them we have talked about them before. They teach you how to write as a scientist, um, gain confidence and in your presentation and all that stuff. So Cindy, um, so I think you can take it from here and maybe we introduce the speakers. But one thing we request at the end is there's a link here where you can provide your feedback based on how this workshop will be. Just be open because that is very critical in terms of improving our delivery and at the same time what we are supposed to include in maybe in the future. So yeah, that's all I wanted maybe to quickly share with you.
Cool. Maybe we should invite the speakers to introduce themselves.
Mhm.
So, Will, Jensen, who wants to go first? Don't make me pick on you.
I can go first if that's
Okay,
easy.
thank you.
Um, do you want me to share my slides as well, or just introduce
Yeah,
myself?
Uh,
sure.
I think you can share.
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
All
go
right.
ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna see if this works then. Hopefully you can all see this.
Yeah.
Okay, let
See
me
Yeah.
that.
see. Can you see it in full screen now? Or do you
Oh, yeah.
see? Yeah, okay. Perfect. Okay. Hi, I'm Will. I am a graduate student finishing up my PhD at Princeton University in the US. I work with Euro Trump on things like theoretical and computational seismology. And I listed some of my interests, a broad range of things. I have never given an oral presentation at AGU, but I've given two posters in 2022 and one poster in 2024. But I've given some oral presentations in other conferences and departments, and so I can try and speak on that if that's helpful too. But I'm mostly going to talk about posters for today. Um, so the two parts for me that I'm going to focus on is really the designing of the poster and then presenting the poster. Of course, the big step in between is getting it printed, getting it safely to the conference, etc., which can be a pain. But that maybe we can discuss that later. Um, so when I'm kind of making my posters, I start by thinking about what's the story that I want to tell somebody when they come to my poster. What's the flow of the kind of poster that I'm trying to present to people? And usually it's going to follow something like this, something that's similar to a manuscript, right? There's an introduction, there's some kind of motivation, followed by the methods and the data, go on to the results and then the takeaways that you want people to have from coming to visit your poster. But you might have, depending on what you're presenting, a different way of doing it, right? So you might have a case where the first part is the same, but you have two different distinct results that you want to present to people, and then your takeaways. And so my point here is that once you have an idea of what you want to tell people and the story that you want to tell, that's going to help to shape how you then go ahead and design your poster. So that's the first thing I always do is kind of think through that flow. And then I'll think about some figures. These are some examples that I'll use in the next slides, but the main points I would say here is I tend to try and keep a smaller number of figures, maybe 3 or 4 figures in the poster. I've seen posters that have 20 figures on them, and then it can get distracting to which ones are the important ones. I try and have kind of one in the introduction that motivates things, one or two in describing my methods, and then the really key results at the end. And one thing to bear in mind here is using some kind of vector formats or scalable figure formats. And you can Google which formats those include. But things that are not going to get really blurry when you print them on a very big poster. Um, so that's the next thing I think about. What are the main figures that I want to tell my story with? And then I go and look up all of the requirements on the AGU website. And I think this is the ones from this year, but double check it. And my big recommendations would be do not make your poster bigger than the board. People often have their posters kind of draping over the edge of the board, or even worse, going into somebody else's poster space. And it just doesn't look great. And make sure you leave some margin when you print things as well, because often there's some kind of error in the printing as well. So we have our story, we have the figures that we want to include, and we know what size we want to make it on PowerPoint or Adobe or whatever tool you're using. Um, the next things that I then think about is my section layout, and that comes back to the story or the flow that I was kind of thinking of to start with, right? So this is one example that I had from a while ago, where it's kind of a straightforward introduction, methods, results, takeaway. And so I was like, okay, well, we'll get the people to read it from left to right. So introduction, methods in section 2, data, results, going from left to right across the poster. And thinking about how people are going to read your poster is important, and making sure that it's clear how you want them to read it. So here I'm using numbered sections, but some people use arrows to go between the sections and things like that. So otherwise it can get confusing where I'm meant to look first. But if I had a different flow, for example, this one that I had this year in AGU, I had two very distinct results. And so what I wanted to do is kind of design my poster to reflect that, right? So the middle has my introduction and my method section. And then result number one is here on the left-hand side, and result number two is here on the right-hand side. And so I say this just to emphasize thinking about the story you want to tell can be important in how you then set up the sections of your poster. The next thing that I then kind of do is I think about all of the other bits like the color scheme, the fonts, the design side of things, and try and set that up before I start putting all of my poster together. I think there's lots of different ways you can do this correctly, but the main thing here is consistency, and making sure that your poster looks like one cohesive kind of thing that was put together. And so one thing that I often do, and obviously this is not the only way you can do it, is I will usually base the color scheme for my poster on the color scheme that I'm using for my figures. So you can see the kind of yellows and purples here from this figure end up being the colors that I'm going to use for the rest of the poster as well, just so it kind of looks coherent. So we have our sections, we have our flow of how we want to talk through the poster. We can then fill in the figures, and that is kind of the nice next thing to do. Once you have your figures on there, you have a good idea of how much space you have left for the text that you want to have on your poster. And of course, that's kind of the last important part, right? Is adding in all of the text. But that's the last thing I do, because I kind of, by putting in the figures first, it gives me some idea of how much space I have left. The key things that I would think about here are avoiding long paragraphs of text. Generally, by day 3 or 4 of AGU, I'm super tired and I can't think about reading really long paragraphs of text. That short bullet points can be helpful. Um, Making sure that you really just highlight the key points of what you're doing, right? So like this is not a manuscript and you don't need to include all of the details, but highlight the key points. Having said that, you need to make sense, the poster needs to make sense without you being there. You're not going to be stood at your poster all day, and so make sure that it is a coherent story if you're not there to tell it. I can kind of, I guess, point out on this example here, right? The introduction, I think, has some nicer, shorter bullet points, whereas the data has these longer sections of text, which are kind of hard to read and have lots of details in, which are not particularly fun to read. Um, in terms of making it make sense, one of the things I think is really important is to make sure you define any acronyms or symbols that you're using on your poster. These might be standard symbols or acronyms in your field, but they might not be in somebody else's field. And so making sure that you explain exactly what you mean by a certain variable or symbol. And you don't have to do this, but one thing I usually have leaned towards doing nowadays is using numbered citations instead of blocks of, people's names, just because you have limited space on your slides, sorry, on your poster, and filling it up with lots of author names is not the best use of your space. So that's the kind of tech side of things. And this is the poster I had last year, and I thought I would just kind of go through the same process to reiterate. So the first thing I do is I put together my sections. I have my flow that tells me I'm going to go from one, two, three, and then over to four. And then I'll fill in my figures. And with the key figures that I have, I will then generally use the color schemes from those to design the poster. And so then I would kind of fill in the regions that I have left for my text. That's these colors here. And then the last thing I would do is add in all of the horrible text that is the main part of the design in the end is takes the most time to do. So hopefully that gives you some idea of how I go through the process. It's of course not the only way you can do things, but one way to think about designing your poster. I think when it comes to presenting, that's more really where your personality comes out, and of course, people have different ways of doing it. The first thing I would say is make sure you practice talking through it before you go. And the reason for that is I've had times where I've been trying to explain something to somebody and say, "Oh, I really wish I had that figure on my poster. That would be really helpful to point to right now." And I don't have it because I didn't practice it before I went. And so knowing what you want to say before you go, you make sure that you have a kind of consistent story. When people come up to your poster, the first two things that I've kind of do, which other people did to me and I thought was a nice thing. First, just ask someone if they want you to talk through the poster. Some people would like to read the poster by themselves and kind of tired or don't really feel like they want to engage and just want to kind of look at the science themselves. But generally, people will say yes. And if they do, the next thing is then ask what they do and what their interests are. That can be good for networking. It can be a good way of understanding where they're coming from. And it will really help you to tailor the kind of pitch or presentation that you want to give to them, right? So some people are going to be not in your field and just want a 1 minute, very quick overview of what you're talking about or what you've done. And other people are going to be really, really interested in the details because they already know half of the stuff on your slides or on your presentation. And so knowing what they already know can be really helpful. And prepare a couple of different versions of your presentation for those different audiences. Have a kind of 1 minute overview, maybe a 3 or 4 minute more detailed or slightly longer version of it for people who are really, really interested. And then when it comes to talking to people, I think one of the questions Albert highlighted was about what do you do with people who are more kind of senior in the field or more established in the field, and how do you kind of put your science across to those people? I think there's two sides to this. One is being open to feedback that people have. You're there to kind of share ideas and hear from people and discuss research. And so people might have ideas and constructive criticism and be open to hearing from that. But at the same time, don't be afraid to kind of show off the science that you have done and stand your ground a little bit, right? Some people, will come in very or will seem kind of aggressive in the ways they're asking things. And it's okay. You're the person who has made this science or done this science, and there's a reason that you're there to present that. It's because you've done interesting and exciting science, and so you should make sure that you are kind of standing your ground and telling people about that in a positive way. Um, and I think finally, try and include everybody who comes to your poster. Um, ideally what you would have is you would have one person comes up, you talk to them, and then the next person comes up and you talk to them. Generally, what happens is you stand there by yourself for 5 minutes, not talking to anybody, and then 10 people come over all at the same time, and you're panicked trying to speak to all of these people at once. Um, Try and make it more of a kind of group environment where everybody is included within that, and make sure that you're kind of making more of an open circle where everybody can see your poster and feel like they're part of a group that you're talking to. Sometimes you'll find that you're talking to one person and they're asking lots and lots and lots of questions, and you're ignoring other people because of that. You can always say to somebody like, "Hey, do you mind? Like, I'd love to keep talking about this, but do you mind if I also include these people and talk them through the poster, and then we can have a discussion as a group." So try and make sure that everybody who comes to your poster gets to chat to you, and feels kind of included in sharing those ideas. Um, so hopefully that gives you kind of some ideas of the things that I would try and do. I'm happy to talk more about different experiences or things, but hopefully that's a good starting guide on some things.
Cool, thank you, Will. That was really insightful. I'd just like to open up questions, if people would like to ask questions, and if not, you could ask them at the end. So feel free to ask any questions at any point, and I'll relay those questions later. But Jensen, would you like to present now as well?
Yeah, I can go now.
Collate all the
Let
questions.
me, yeah, let me pull up my slides. Okay. Hi, let me put this in presentation mode if I can remember how to do that. I think Will had like a great lead in for things. That was like a perfect way to describe how to make a poster and everything along the ways. Mine is more like chaotic tips and tricks and kind of like things of note. So this will be nice complementing each other. I'm Jensen DeGrande. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Washington. I won an OSTA in the seismology section last year for a poster I presented, which I have a picture here, and I'll be going through the details of that one specifically. I also won one in the geodesy section for an oral presentation, which I haven't focused on in these slides, but I'm happy to answer questions about the oral presentation process there. My main areas of research include seismogeodesy. So I look at how we can use geodesy for seismology applications, specifically looking at earthquake early warning with GNSS data. Okay, so walking it through a little bit of like the poster creation. This is my poster. It's a lot. I know it's a lot. I'll go through things I did right, things I did wrong. But at the end of the day, as long as you're thinking of it as like a fun way to put your research across, and like I like to think of it a little bit as like an art project, so you can have a little bit of fun with your research too. For the actual setup of it, you need to pick first a software that you're going to make your PowerPoint or your poster in. And I like to use PowerPoint just because I'm familiar with it, but I know people use Illustrator or other software packages as well. PowerPoint, a key thing to do is to set the slide size before you do anything to whatever dimensions that AGU or whatever conference says that your poster needs to be. That way you don't have to scale everything up at the end of it. And so you can kind of put things on there as needed. At least that's how it is in PowerPoint. With Illustrator, you have a little bit more flexibility. When designing a poster, empty space is your friend. I did very poorly at this because I don't like empty space. So there's a lot of figures and a lot of different text on here. But at the end of the day, as long as the information is there and you're presenting it well, and like Will mentioned, it kind of tells the story despite you maybe not being at your poster the entire day. That's kind of the main point that you should be getting across with your poster. Okay. Next, the general design. I'm kind of a fan of a classic poster layout, so you can kind of see the flow of things. And Will had a great graphic for this where you're kind of going in the introduction, the methods, and the results that you're looking at. I've seen a few different ones where people tend to focus on having like a big figure and some key points. And I think those ones work well for certain research, but it's hard to tell an entire story with like one big figure, in my opinion. So, but to each their own, whatever fits your research, as long as you're kind of sticking with the design and having some consistency. And so in this one, I like to go for a landscape layout. So people typically read from left to right as each column goes across. I think the landscape works a little bit better because you're at eye level with just how the poster boards are set up. Sometimes the vertical ones will go off the board or be too high or be too low for different people that are approaching your poster. I like to use section headers to guide the reader, and I'll usually make this a different font color than the main text to kind of make it pop out that each one is a different section. And then I'll also add pop outs of important information or the conclusions like I've done here. So kind of like main points are in these little boxes of color, as well in the conclusions and kind of what's next step are also in a different color. Speaking of color, picking a color scheme that you like always makes your poster stand out. Somebody had a question about how to make an eye-catching poster. And I think just having fun with the color scheme, I see a lot that are just kind of like black and white. And I think those ones get overlooked a little bit just because people are looking for something to grab their attention as they're walking through this like hall of thousands of posters. So you want to have something that like draws people to your poster, especially in the poster sessions, because there are people just like walking around that may not be familiar with your field. And so it gives you a chance to reach out to different people and get people that you normally wouldn't be talking to your science about. And then always have collaborators funding, a contact email, and your poster session and number. And so I usually try to put all of this at the top just so people are like, who are you? Who are you working with? And then I'll have the funding kind of down at the bottom so people know if research is funded by NSF or NASA or whatever funding source you may have. Okay, for the poster content itself, text you should strive for as little as possible. I also did like not a great job at this, but I try to stick my text mostly in the intro and the conclusion. I think a bulk of the analysis should be in your figures or your graphs, and those are things that you want to talk about. And you can have bullet points to guide the like reader or the audience. But I think at the end of the day, the bulk of the text should be kind of like what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it. And then for like similar to what Will had said, instead of having like a block of text, it's nice to use bullet points or points of text to draw people's attention to smaller sentences, just because it is hard to read an entire paragraph on a poster, especially when you're like standing there and you're like trying to present, but then somebody's like trying to read it. So it just makes it easier for everyone in the interaction. Also, I see as sometimes people will put their abstracts on their poster, which I think adds a lot of text to the poster that's not necessary or not necessarily necessary, because your abstract is available in the program and online. So a lot of the time you don't need that information on your poster, and you can kind of have a few bullet points of introducing your work, but not necessarily the entire abstract. And then for the font sizes, there are the official guidelines on the AGU website, but I always strive for at least like a minimum of like 30 point, just because it does get harder to read the smaller your font size is. And I've seen a few posters where the font size is like teeny tiny, and it's really hard to read those as like an audience member. And then your figures should highlight the important parts of your research. And again, similar with the text, you want to make those figures bigger than you think when you're actually making the poster, because if they are small, it does make it harder to interpret those, especially if there's any sort of text on those figures, it's going to get even smaller. For the presentation itself, I have a lot of experience presenting, and some of the main tips or takeaways from that is to be prepared and confident in your research. You want to take every opportunity to practice your presentation. So if you want to present to fellow grad students in your research group or to different seminars in your program, I think that's a great way to get experience and feedback on your poster or oral presentations. And that way, when you're presenting at these different conferences where you're interacting and building your network, you come off as confident in your science. For the poster presentations, I like to think of it more as a conversation with the audience. So Will had mentioned there's usually a bunch of people that will come up to you at the same time. You'll be in the middle of talking to someone and someone else will approach. So I usually try to open it and like make it a full conversation with everyone that's there. You'll have this kind of like poster spiel as like you get going on your poster, which is basically like talking points of what, how, and why. This is typically like 3 to 5 minutes of you explaining what your poster is. And then with that, I like to be flexible with answering questions mid-presentation. That way people think of it as more of like a casual interaction rather than like listening to someone present the entire time and then asking questions. But it is going to be different with every person. Like you will have people that come up and they're super excited about your research, and so they're just asking a bunch of questions right off the bat. So I think a key to poster presentations is being flexible with it a little bit. Oral presentations are a little different. I think of this as more as a showcase for the audience. For these, you'll want to practice a lot beforehand, especially given like the timing aspect of it. Like you want to be able to answer questions and oral presentations. Once you're up on the stage, it goes super quick. So just make sure you're practicing and hitting the time frame that you need to be in. Also, a note with like speaker notes, most conferences you will have those, but each one is different. I think a key to this is not like reading off of them directly because I've seen that before. And like the audience can tell. So just making sure that you're practicing a little bit more than you think you need to. Um, oh, and then somebody had asked about like what kind of people attend different sessions. I think you'll get a lot more variety and like general interest in the poster sessions, while the oral presentations do seem to be a little bit more specific to your science because people are just going out of their way to go to these specific sessions. Well, I mentioned earlier, the posters are kind of just in this big hall and everyone's jumbled together. For the presentation itself, I think a key to this is treating every person that comes up to your poster or asks you a question in the audience as a potential reviewer or somebody that is trying to understand your science from a deeper perspective. And I think this is a great way to network and kind of build your scientific community as well. So treating each person as like generally like interested in exactly what you're doing and wants to know each step that you took in your process, I think is a great way to just kind of have conversations with people and network. And then answering questions as best as you can. Don't be afraid to say, like, I hadn't considered that, or thanks for pointing that out. If something comes up that you're not sure of what the answer is, it's better than kind of making something up on the fly or just being like, oh, I don't know. Like, there's kind of like nuanced ways to think about how to present yourself despite not knowing certain things. Because at the end of the day, you are an expert in the research that you're presenting, but we're all still students. So everyone will be kind of receptive to the point that you're still learning and gathering feedback on things. And that's kind of the end. So I can answer questions from here or we can break it up.
Thank you, Jensen. That was great.
Yeah.
So no questions so far from the chat. But I guess we could open up the panel. If you want to share your screen, Albert, um, on the panel slide.
Mm-hmm. Just a minute.
Yeah, we'll give them some time to think of all those questions, you know. Did you want to click on slideshow?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So Ronnie from the chat asks, from Uganda, will you share with us these slides afterwards? Yes, we can. We can email all of you the slides, and if our presenters don't mind sending the slides. Another question from Cyan. Do you have a session where there's a 5 minute talk and then a poster? What can I do in the 5 minutes talk presentation? How many slides and the information, like what information goes in the 5 minute GeoBurst session? I don't know if Will and Jensen, do you have any experience with that at all?
I've never done a geoburst, but I think they're interesting. I think you can think of it as like kind of a regular poster presentation in terms of like that 5 minutes of what you're talking about is like going through your poster. And then I think if I remember right, you get like an online poster or something like that as well. So
Like
I've
an
seen people
poster
do
or
this where
something?
they like break up, yeah, where they like break up the poster as like their slides. So you can kind of talk through it a little bit more spaced out rather than having one big poster as your slide. But that's how I've seen it done before. I've never done one at this point.
Yeah, I haven't done one of these. I think it seems like they change the format for the different things every
Almost every
year.
year.
But
Yeah, no, I
I've done
agree.
ones where they've had like you have your poster and then you have a 5 minute pitch of your poster at some separate session. I generally found that the people who go to those those 5 minute pitches tend to be the other people who are presenting their posters. Um, but I think this sounds like a different format, and so
Yeah,
yeah.
that's no worries. Um, so there aren't any more questions, but I have a question of my own. How do you two personally handle nerves or stage fright before presenting? If you have any like rituals or just practice.
I'll go first, I guess. I'm a very anxious presenter, if it wasn't, obvious by how I present. I just kind of like talk fast and like go with
Mhm.
it. I like to try to make it like part of my personality. I think people enjoy when you have like a little bit of like personality and nervousness to like how you're talking about your science because it makes it feel a little less like serious and a little less
Yeah,
scary when people are receptive to that. And then
but you could
in
also straight
addition
up
to
say,
that,
"Sorry, I'm a bit nervous," and then everyone will be
yes,
more understanding. Um,
definitely. Especially like as people know that like you're students, I think people are okay with it, especially if you bring it up and you're like, oh, like sorry, like this is my first time presenting, or like this is my first time presenting this research. Like I think people will be receptive to that. And then in addition, I think it's always important to, eat a good breakfast before.
so true.
Yeah, I think with the oral ones, it can be. I tend to just try and practice it as much as I possibly can. Like I think what Jensen was saying about having speaker notes, I tend to try and get it to a point where I know what I want to say as soon as the slide comes up. It's kind of like there is a script, but it's kind of in my head, and so I almost don't have to think about the audience too much. I think with the posters, like I also always get nervous presenting posters because you never know who's going to come up to it. I think I don't know, I always think of it a little bit like making pancakes. Like the first few are going to be a bit bad, but then after it, like, I don't know, the first few people that come up, they're not your best presentation. But then once you kind of get into your rhythm, you get kind of an idea of how you want to do things. And so, yeah, I think everyone's going to be nervous. That's the nature of presenting. And so, it just kind of means that you're human and that's okay. Um,
Cool.
Cindy, uh,
Yeah.
we could go over maybe a few of these questions. If anyone
There
could.
is one more question in the
Okay.
chat. Someone asks, what's the best way to present preliminary or ongoing research without making it seem incomplete? That's a very good and interesting question. If anyone, like,
Um,
both of you can chime in, honestly.
yeah, I can chime in on this one because I do this a lot where I present research that's still ongoing. I think a key point to making this seem like, or not making it seem like it's incomplete, is to have like a what's next or like next steps kind of little part on your poster or like on your slides or like looking to the future or something like that because then it shows that you've done the preliminary work and you have some sort of results to present, but also there's other things that you want to continue working on, which makes it not complete but in a way where it's like ongoing research still.
yeah, I think this is the tricky bit about having the abstract deadline 6 months before the conference is that most people haven't done the work that they're saying they're going to do in the abstract. And that's absolutely fine. Like everybody does this. I think being being clear about the parts that are done and things like that and not kind of I wouldn't start it by saying like this is all incomplete, this is all something that is not finished yet. I would kind of present the bits that you are solid on, but then as Jensen said, the bits that are ongoing, be very clear about that, right? Because part of the nice bit about conferences is that you can get conversations with people and people have ideas and people have ways to kind of do those next steps, and you can collaborate with people and things. And so it's absolutely okay to present stuff that seems incomplete. Like one of the posters I showed earlier, the results were just like they were showing that something wasn't working, and that's fine. And that wasn't ideal, but it's okay to just say that and don't try and hide it because people will know that it's ongoing research. Yeah.
To be honest, negative results are still results. Like people have had like research questions around it, and you've answered the question like whether that's negative or positive. It's still a contribution, like a step towards progress. So
Yeah.
yeah, don't be shy about negative results at all. Um, I also had another question. I went in 2023, but how did you guys bring your poster to the actual conference center? And did you have experience printing it out at AGU yourself, or did you travel with it?
I have always printed mine here. We're pretty lucky that we have a printer in the department, and so but like of course, different places have different setups. I've seen generally like the printing bit at AGU seems to be really busy and can be quite stressful for people who are trying to pick up their posters and or like arriving late to their poster sessions before. Um, I my feeling or my personal advice would be, given that it costs money to print it at AGU, you might as well pay to get it printed somewhere locally and know that you have it before you arrive. But transporting it can be difficult. I think I've seen two different types of posters really. There's the ones where you have these kind of paper prints, and then there's also these more like silk type things that you can get it printed on, which
Fabric.
yeah, the fabric ones, which like then don't they don't crease in the same way. But I think that the two big things would be make sure you get a good poster tube, which you can take on a plane, and most airlines will let you take it on as hand luggage. Some will not. And make sure you have it printed before the day that you're meant to be presenting, because it just reduces the stress a lot.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've only printed mine at the university and taken it with me like on a plane and like a poster tube. Um, and then it does seem like very chaotic the first few days of like AGU or the conference for like poster present or printing. Like if you're presenting like Monday or Tuesday, I would say it's probably better to print it and bring it with you. But I have had friends who've presented on like Wednesday or Thursday and they've like got it printed and it was very like it seemed like it was an easy process. So if you're earlier in the week, I think it's better to have it with you and have it ready. And then if you have to, like, I like to think of it as like worst case scenario if I need to print at like AGU. So I think that's a good way to think about it.
So I set this question up because I have personally had experience with like bringing the poster to the conference, but also I realized I had a really bad typo and I had like PhD money to spend at that point. So I was like, well, I could just like print it out um at the meeting itself, and if not, I'll just use my old one with the typo in. And actually, it seems pretty chaotic, but the pickup time was really quick. They turned around within a day, and I was like, oh, great. You just have to like pick it up quite early if you have the afternoon session, and I think it might be the day before if you have a morning session, but double check that. It was pretty easy for me. So yeah. Someone in the chat asks, can my co-author attend the meeting in person, and is there an additional registration process? I think anyone who attends AGU has to register. Um, so I think if you register now, you can get the early bird registration fee, which is a lot cheaper than the the regular fee. So definitely let your co-author register now.
Mm. Do we have any more questions in the chat?
So far, oh, someone asked, how do you deal with an audience that might be much more experienced on your topic and have views that contradict your findings? That's very spicy. Um, do any of you have experience with that? Because I don't think I do, but
I don't.
I had in the geodesy oral presentation that I had 2 years ago. It was about earthquake early warning, and I had this guy, like this older professor, stand up and be like, "So, like, what's the point? Like, you get like 10 extra seconds or something, like insane." And I was just kind of reiterated my science points and like the conclusions that my science like contributed to the field. He was like, "Oh, okay," and like sat down. So I think try to be like respectful of these people that are much more experienced, but also like if you're confident in your science and like you have it backed up by what you've done and like your advisor or your co-authors also have like backed it up, I think it's fair to like kind of have a back and forth a little bit, but just remaining respectful during the process.
Yeah, I'd definitely say try and stay respectful. I think some people there are people who will try and make a big point about how they know lots about something and you don't, and that kind of reflects more on them than it does on you. Like I've had people come up to my poster and just be like, I think that equation's wrong. Like the units on it are wrong. And I'm like, okay, why do you think that might be? Like, can you tell me why? And then we've 5 minutes later been like, it's not wrong, but that's fine. But you know, sometimes you will have people who will like to really just talk about their stuff and make it about them, and that's kind of it. But most people kind of see through that, right? As long as you remain kind of professional and respectful. And so I think that's the personal side of it. I think from the people will have views maybe that contradict some of your research. That's part of science. And that's okay. I think one thing you can do is, and I try and do this for presentations, is think about the kind of questions like who's in the room. And of course, you can't always predict that, but who might be in the room and what kind of opposing views might there be? And you know, if those exist, what kind of questions can you imagine somebody asking and what answers might you have? So try and give yourself some preparation on those kind of things. But yeah, to be honest, some people are just rude for the sake of being rude, and that's on them. That's not on you. So
Yeah.
that's so true. I would say don't take it too personally or try not to. Mainly if they are right, then they are helping your entire like project, and it might be something you haven't considered. Make it, yeah, respectful. But if you have opposing views, then you just agree to disagree, and that's part of your job. It's nothing personal, like so yeah, you'll be fine.
Mhm.
So we're down to 5 minutes. I guess we could look at the questions that were asked before and see if Will and Johnson wanna chime
Mhm.
in. Yep, that's
I think we have gone
yep.
through some of these.
Yeah, we can skip those.
There's one here, I think, which we have also.
Which
Um,
is kind of interesting because I guess like what do you mean by assertive? Because it's like you want to talk to people kind of naturally about your work and
yeah.
like if you have an agenda, then sure, like please hire me and stuff like that. But uh, if you talk to them as a normal human being, I'm sure you'll make friends.
Yeah, and they can find more information
Yes.
from that link. It's well detailed. So, yep. Um, I think that's done.
Yeah.
I think our speakers have talked about that
Yeah.
as well. Mm.
So yeah, we've sent in the group chat what uh the formal poster guidelines are and also the talk guidelines. So if anything, we'll share the slides at the end as well. So
Mhm.
no worries. I guess if there aren't any more questions, we could probably conclude.
Mhm.
But before we officially end this meeting, Albert and I would like to give a very big thank you to our amazing speakers for taking the time to share your presentation strategies and experiences with us. We hope that their advice on how to communicate research clearly and confidently was helpful and motivating for this upcoming fall meeting. I'm sure we've learned a lot and we're very grateful for your support. So let's give them a big hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Will and Jensen.